So in today's video, what we're going to do is take a look at systems, specifically systems for playing online. So maybe you'd really like to get started playing online, but you're not sure, which system would work best for you. Or maybe you're already playing online, but you're starting to think, I'd like to try something different. Maybe my current system isn't really working for me the way I'd like. So right off the bat, of course, there's no one perfect system. And that's not what I'm here to do today, to tell you have to play X, Y, or Z system. However, I do think there's some things to consider, that certain situations or certain systems will be better in certain situations. Now, what situations are we going to take a look at? We're going to take a look at the types of players. We're going to take a look at the game master and the dungeon master and what they might prefer. And also some different ways to play online, like with virtual tabletops or other ways, and which ones might work best. Now, I put the groups into three broad categories. There's probably more, but these are the three we're going to work with today. And the first grouping I'm going to talk about are rules light games. So these are games, I would say, if you can write your character on an index card or one side of a sheet of loose leaf, it's probably a rules light game. How about some examples? And these are only a few. I know there's a game, Tiny Dungeons, and they have a science fiction game, Tiny Frontiers. There's games powered by the apocalypse. I believe Monster of the Week is one of those. There's even one called Index Card RPG. I think you could consider Fate games and Fudge games, probably more rules light. Microlight 20 is a great example. There's so many genres in Microlight 20. It's worth taking a look at. And also almost any homebrew system. If you kind of put together a few skills and a few qualities that your character has, you can easily take a dice mechanic and make a quick rules light game for a homebrew system. So what type of players work really well for these rules light games? I would say they're great for new players. I just think it's so exciting when someone's never played a role-playing game and you can give them kind of a rules light game and have them have a good time at the table. I've had that happen a few times at conventions. It's really a great feeling to introduce somebody to the hobby. Also, another thing to think about with rules light systems is a lot of the systems are available free online. So I know like Microlight 20, there's a SRD for Fate, and I know there's other games too. But for a lot of these rules light games, the rules are free. That way, everyone can have a copy of the rule book. No matter where they are in the world, they can know what the rules are. And I think that's great, especially for new players. Now, some things for the DM to consider. Rules light games are great if you want to run a one-shot. So if you need a break from your normal game and you say, I need like a one-shot monster hunting, like this TV show Supernatural, or I need a one-shot, 1 or 2 evenings of Star Wars, or just something to play something different. So don't overthink a one-shot. A rules light game is perfect for that, or you can just, like I said, borrow a mechanic from your favorite game and quick homebrew something. Now, rules light games are really good for the DM. When you're running online, especially if you've never run online, maybe you've played online but you haven't run, there's a lot for the DM or the game master to consider. There's all these technical issues, and you have to be thinking about your map and your tokens and making sure everybody has a character sheet, along with keeping everybody involved in the game and trying to keep everybody interested and involved. There's that social aspect. So there's a huge cognitive load when you're running a game online, even more so than at the table. So a rules light system can really help lighten some of that cognitive load. You don't have to think about every single rules things because, let's face it, there aren't that many rules. Now, what type of tabletop would work for a rules light game? Really, these are great if you want to run theater of the mind. If you just want to, get on Zoom or Teams or Google Meet or something and just kind of do a theater of the mind thing, that's great. But you can get a little bit more detail with that. For a long time, I ran a game just using an online whiteboard, Twidla, and there's other ones out there, certainly. Just email them their character sheets, or maybe you could put it into Google Docs so they can have their character sheets. And something like an online whiteboard, you can draw a little map or you can import an image. It's a real simple game, real simple way to play, and rules light games are great for that. And absolutely, they can work on a virtual tabletop like Roll20, and certainly there's other ones too. You can play rules light games on those, no problem. Now I want to talk about old school games. And I'm going to call these mid-crunch games. I'm sure there's modern games that would fit in the mid-crunch too. So old school and mid-crunch, let's call them another category. So these have a little more detail in their rules system. Rules light games, sometimes they can be a little vague. They don't necessarily define everything, and that's sort of the point. So the game master has to sometimes come up with a ruling for a rules light. But the old school games and what I'm going to call the mid-crunch games try to tighten things up, give a few more rules. So some examples of ones I might consider mid-crunch are pretty much any of your old school Dungeons and Dragons, whether you like Basic Expert, whether you like AD&D or Second Edition, or any of their retro clones, and there's many of them out there. I enjoyed Star Frontiers as an old school game, and there's like a mid-crunch. There's some numbers to keep track of there. Traveler, Marvel Superheroes. So what type of players would work well for these kind of games? I would say players who maybe are a little bit more veteran. Maybe they played them back in the day, or they've played role-playing games for a few years, so they're kind of familiar with how everything works. You might also, though, want to consider some of these old school games for new players. Because if you throw them right into some of the more modern editions, let's say of Dungeons and Dragons, they might be a little overwhelmed with some of the rules. So some of the old school games have a little bit fewer rules that you need to keep track of. So some things on DM considerations. In these old school games, the mechanics are not unified like a modern game. Often you'll roll a percentile for one thing and a d20 for something else, and then a d6 for something else. So you may need to be doing a little bit more looking up rules while you're running your game. Now, I would say once you're starting to get into your mid-crunch games, you really want to look into something like a Roll20 or a Fantasy Grounds, one of these virtual tabletops. Because your character sheet's going to become a little bit more involved, and most of these virtual tabletops have a place right on their setup so that you can store your character sheets there. You could still get away with meeting, through Zoom or Google Meet or Teams or something. Like I said, you could email the character sheets or post them. So you could still do it that way, although I think you're really going to want something like a virtual tabletop to organize yourself. Now, if I can make a recommendation on old school games, if you want to play old school fantasy, my preference or my suggestion might be to look at Basic Fantasy RPG. Only because it's free. It's all online. Everybody can have all the rules, and everybody can have all the options. Now, if you prefer another OSR game, still a lot of the stuff on the Basic Fantasy site, because it's free, and you could easily port it into Labyrinth Lord or plain old D&D or Old School Essentials or whatever you like. So that's just a little recommendation I have on the mid-crunch games. Now, of course, there are more complex games, and we should take a look at these more complex games also. So, what do I mean by more complex games? I mean the elephant in the room. I mean Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. But also things like Pathfinder and Starfinder, Star Trek Adventures. Now, I would say, why would you want to run these? They're very popular. They're more complex. This is what people are seeing a lot of times when they're watching different streams on YouTube and Twitch and game things like that. So what type of players will work for these more complex games? More experienced players, or players who really love a lot of crunch, love a lot of rules and systems and things. But also, don't discount new players, because new players may want to play the latest edition of Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder 2nd edition or whatever. So new players, they may want to get in the game and they say, no, I want to play what I'm seeing on YouTube. So here's some considerations for Dungeon Masters. More rules means, more rules. It means more rules on top of all the other management that we talked about earlier. So, you may need to be doing a little bit more looking up or studying up on the rules a little bit beforehand. But if you know and love the system and you're willing to teach it, because not everybody, not all your players, for the most part, are going to be up on the latest edition of everything. So if you're willing to explain things as you go along and you really love this system, go for it. Absolutely. They're more complex, but if it's your love, I'm not going to tell you not to do that. So, if that's a thing that's really going to make you happy. Now, the virtual tabletops. I would say for more complex games, they're almost a requirement. You really need something designed to support one of these games. And in a way, they're designed for this. A lot of them have character creation and management software. Like you just say, I want to level up now, and it helps you level up. Or you want to create the character, and it'll guide you through the step. So it is more complex, but there's more digital tools out there to help you. And also, I know Roll20, for example, and I'm sure some of the other ones, they allow you to buy some of the rule books online, and then you can just port them right into the game. So you need to look up spells. It's right there in your virtual tabletop. You don't have to page through the rule books. You can simply do it that way. These are nice, quick references, but obviously there's an expense involved. So let's go and take a look at some closing thoughts. Now, I can't tell you what to play, and I don't want to do that. I will say, just in all honesty, my preference is for lighter rules. Rules light or mid-crunch at the most. Like I said, there's a huge cognitive load when you're DMing, even at a convention game, but especially online, where maybe you're hosting the meeting and you have to move your tokens around and get all your maps online, and you're trying to entertain people or help people be entertained and to be involved. So there's a lot of things to worry about when you're game mastering or dungeon mastering. So my personal preference is lighter rules. But like I said, if you like a heavier system and you can manage that and your players love it, that's great. I'm not going to tell you how to have fun. But one last thought here is, don't overthink the system. People really want to play. People absolutely are out there and they want to play. So there's a lot of free resources out there. And even on some of the more complex games, sometimes they have a basic version or an introductory version, kind of to get you going. And a lot of times they're free. Like those introductories, they're trying to hook you, so they're giving you a free version. So grab one. Make up some pre-generated characters. If you can get people to, join in your table, play, have a great time. Don't overthink it. Don't worry if you miss, I missed a +2 on this roll. Somebody's going to notice and I'm a bad DM. No. Odds are nobody's going to notice. And if they do, you can always say, okay, well, we'll quick re-roll that. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. I know for myself, I remember from playing when characters do something really great, when they really have a great success. I don't really remember, I had to add a +2 to this roll, and then I had a +3. Yeah, you do that as part of the mechanics, but that's not the core of things. Don't overthink it. So if you got something out of this video, please give it a like and subscribe. Maybe you'd like to say something in the comments. Maybe there's something you agree with or you'd like to add on to what I said here. Absolutely. So thank you very much for watching. And if you look below, there's links to all of Sharp Mountain Games products if you'd like to support the channel or just take a look at what we're doing. So thanks again for watching.